Okay, so here's the Tucker Carlson show. Shroud of Turin here, and it's about an hour long, so I'll let you guys watch it here, the full thing. It's an hour and 33 with Jeremiah Johnson.
What's the Shroud of Turin?
The Shroud of Turin is believed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. It's a very unique artifact because we get in this singular artifact the death, burial, and resurrection of the historical Jesus, and no other artifact does that.
What is a burial cloth?
Right, a shroud, which is mentioned in all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is simply burial clothes. It's a linen garment that a corpse is wrapped in. And in a Jewish tradition, similar to a pita, how a pita, you get a pita
like
and
pita
enjoy
bread?
Yeah, literally, it just wraps from over your feet, over the head, and then back around the front of the feet as well. And that is laid, that's when the body is laid to rest within the burial shroud. That's a shroud.
So, you believe that this piece of cloth, which is represented right there, is that the actual size?
1-to-1, 14 feet 4 inches by 3 feet 7 inches, or 8.8 by 2 Assyrian cubits, which was the standard unit of measurement in the Roman Empire.
Okay, so the first fact we can ascertain is that these would have been the dimensions of a burial shroud.
Correct.
In that period.
In the 1st century in antiquity.
Is it a continuously woven piece of cloth? That's one piece of cloth?
It is. Pure linen.
Pure linen. What is linen?
The herringbone weave. It's made from the flax plant, and this has a unique herringbone weave. The only reason I know what herringbone is my wife has a herringbone backsplash in our home that was very costly. So it has this amazing 3-to-1 herringbone weave, which is indicative that a wealthy man would have purchased this actual burial garment in his own pre-death planning. And that's exactly what we see is consistent in the resurrection traditions embedded in the Gospels. Joseph of Arimathea gives Jesus not only his own family tomb, a new tomb, hewn in stone, but he actually gives him his own burial cloth as well.
Okay, and it says that in the Gospels?
Correct.
Okay.
All four.
So, you're saying that this cloth represented right here, 1-to-1, covered Jesus' body.
The historical Jesus, and it's not a death cloth. I actually believe it's a resurrection cloth.
Resurrection cloth.
What's fascinating is this cloth is unique. We have hundreds of burial shrouds from the land of Israel. We have hundreds of them from Qumran. We have them from all over antiquity, really. But what's unique about this burial cloth, Tucker, is that it has embedded in it the image of a crucified man that has complete correspondence with what we know of crucifixion in the Roman Empire, specifically as relates to Jesus of Nazareth.
How do we have hundreds of burial cloths from that period?
Well, it turns out that the Jewish burial traditions were an extremely serious matter, that even Josephus says that the Romans were sensitive to Jewish burial traditions. And so we have...
Josephus is a Jewish historian.
Jewish historian of the 1st century, exactly. And so when these tombs have been excavated, not only are ossuaries found, which are bone boxes that have generations of family bones within them, there's also burial shrouds that have been found, both in Jerusalem and in Masada and other places around the land of Israel.
The climate being dry enough to preserve them.
Absolutely.
For thousands of years.
Thousands of years. In fact, we have people say, well, the Shroud of Turin, it couldn't be Jesus's. You're saying it's 2,000 years old. We actually have linen garments that are much older. They antedate the shroud by 3,000 years. We have the Tarkan dress from Egypt. You can Google it, and it's a beautiful linen blouse, and it's 5,000 years old. So given the right circumstances, linen will last forever.
Amazing.
So it's not a shocker that we have burial cloths from antiquity. It's not a shocker that we have pure linen burial cloths. The shocker is the image that's embedded in the cloth.
Okay.
This scope is the most savage gadget I've ever seen, but because of its insane zoom power, it might get banned soon. While this zoom monster is still legal...
Okay, I have many questions. and I'll ask
I'm excited about
my
this.
first question last,
Okay.
which is, wait, I thought the Shroud of Turin had been thoroughly discredited by modern science.
Right.
And we'll get to that, but let me just
Stay tuned.
provide a partial spoiler by saying what is factually true, which is, no, it has not been.
Correct.
And actually, that science has been updated, as it so often is, and we know that it has not been discredited. But anyway, okay, what image is on this cloth?
This is an image of a bearded man, a strong man, a muscular man, height of 5'10" to 5'11", which is interesting because the average Jewish height in the first century was 5'7" to 5'9", so this man would have been taller. He weighs around 170 to 180 pounds, and since this is a contiguous cloth, it's not strips. We're not talking about mummification, right? The Jews didn't embalm. They had to bury the dead on the day of their death, and that's what we see consistent with all the first century or late Second Temple.
They did not embalm.
They did not embalm, and so they didn't practice mummification. This is why when you read the Gospels and women are coming to the tomb of Jesus on that, what became that first Easter morning, which we know is April 5th, AD 30, or April 9, AD 33, depending on which year you go with. Women are coming to complete the spicing of the body. Why? Because the body would stink. The body's in rigor mortis. Jews would mourn the dead for 7 days inside the family tomb. They would mourn, they would spice the body, and so the women are coming there on that first Easter morning not realizing they're going to be the first evangelists of the Christian faith because the tomb is empty and they see Jesus alive again.
What does it mean to spice a body?
They would perfume it with myrrh, with aloes, because of Jewish burial traditions. Remember when Lazarus dies, he's been dead for 4 days, and Mary and Martha are like, Jesus, don't open the tomb, the body stinketh, according to the King James Version. That's why they would spice the body, because for 7 days you mourn the dead at the family tomb.
So you have to sit next to the corpse,
right.
and the corpse is rotting.
Yeah, I've been in hundreds of Jewish burial tombs. They're all like the shape of our hand, and so you would walk in the tomb. It's always cut out of limestone, and the tomb has different niches, so the fingers represent the niches, but you would pray, you would worship, you would mourn the dead inside essentially a gathering point within the tomb of Jewish burial traditions.
And there'll be slots cut into
these niches. Right, and in those niches are these bone boxes called ossuaries, because 1 year after your family member, your loved one died, you would collect the bones, and those bones would then be placed in a bone box. This is a thing called ossolagium, and that's why when you go to the land of Israel today and you see 150,000 bone boxes on the Mount of Olives, that's all Jewish burial traditions. And so this is very insightful because we see a correspondence with everything we learn about the shroud, and it bears correspondence with the first century world of Jesus.
So, okay, but of the hundreds of thousands of shrouds like this that exist, why do we think this one has an image of Jesus on it?
Because all of it matches the way in which Jesus was crucified, and that's what's powerful about the shroud.
Okay. For example?
For example, on the shroud we have blood all over it. And the blood is interesting. It's been tested. It's type AB blood, which is Semitic blood. The fewest amount of people in the world, only 6% of the world's population has type AB blood. And so this is human blood. It's male blood. It's not blood of an animal. It's not a hoax. You would have to actually kill someone if you were trying to reproduce the shroud, because we have pre-mortem and post-mortem blood all over the shroud. So that's interesting. So this tells us that someone died a torturous death, a death where he was flogged. We see scourges. There are hashes all over the front and back images. What we have is the front on the left, lined up perfectly here in the middle of the camera. We see the face of the crucified man. And what sticks out, you can actually see between rib 5 and 6 a gash in the side. Well, Jesus, we know from John's Gospel, he is penetrated through rib 5 and 6 by a spear. And that spear, John says, blood and water comes out. Well, that's post-mortem blood. We know that that blood differs from the other pre-mortem blood on the shroud. So many of these factoids are indicative that this was a man who had suffered crucifixion under the Romans. They were experts at it. And we see that all of this bears correspondence with what we read in the Gospels about how Jesus died.
How do we know that the man pictured pictured on the shroud was crucified?
That's a great question, because there are crucifixion nail wounds. You can actually see in the forearms of the crucified man. We see, by the way, wrist, hands, the entire hand, it's all the same Greek word. And so Jesus, we know that the nail penetrates through the wrist and the palm, and that's how the Romans would crucify their victims. In fact, we have 21 different evidences of crucifixion with nail penetrations just in the land of Israel in the first century. So this was a common way that the Romans had perfected in killing people.
You should be experiencing comfort every single day of the year, and it should not be something that happens every so often when you get home from work, all the time, no questions asked. And that's why we recommend Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth, Martin Luther said, "I want to make Moses so German that no one would suspect he was a Jew." Now that can sound controversial. It makes bamboo sheets sound weird enough to try. That's what we thought we did, and we're grateful we did. Bamboo sheets are actually incredibly... Your first purchase comes with no risk. You either love them or you send them back, no questions asked. Go to CozyEarth.com, use the code Tucker for up to 40% off. The softest bedding, bath, and apparel. If you get a post-purchase survey, tell them you've heard about Cozy Earth right here on this podcast. Built for real life, made to keep up with your life. Cozy Earth. So we know that crucifixion was an historical practice.
Absolutely, and it's the best established fact of the ancient world, Jesus' death by Roman crucifixion.
What does that mean?
Meaning that if we can't know that Jesus died by Roman crucifixion based on the historical record, we shouldn't believe anything from history at all. We have as much evidence for the crucifixion of Jesus that we have from Roman empires of the Roman emperors of the same period, which is remarkable.
It is remarkable. Where does that evidence come from?
It comes out of all of the sources: Tacitus, Suetonius, Lucian. We have 11 different sources within, and I always use what the most critical scholars use, within 100 years of the time of Jesus, which his ministry begins in 26 to 27 AD. He's crucified, as we said, on that first Easter weekend, April 5. He's resurrected. He's crucified April 3rd, AD 30. We know the exact date, which is fascinating to know that. And then we have 11 sources. AD 30. Right. And so we have 11 sources that talk about this Jesus, this Christus. He's spelled in variant ways, but they're all talking about the same person, this Jesus Christ, who's crucified under the reign of Pontius Pilate at the hands of the Jews. And that's written in Tacitus, Suetonius, Josephus. There's some remarkable work coming out with Josephus recently, that Josephus, who we've already mentioned, the first century Roman historian, he would have had a first-hand knowledge. He would have had friends who were at the trial of Jesus, and he writes about that.
He was not a Christian?
No.
So of those 11, obviously you got the authors of the four Gospels who testified to this.
Saul, Paul. You have Paul.
Yep. Those are all followers of Jesus.
Right.
But you have non-Christians.
Absolutely. You have hostile witnesses who give voice to the historicity of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus.
Interesting. So what does the face tell us?
The face is remarkable. When you look at this is truly remarkable. So let me back up for a minute. In 1898, the first photograph is taken of the shroud. Okay, remember, photography has only been invented in the 1840s. And so in 1898, when the shroud has been on display, the shroud has only been on public display a few times in its entire history. And right now, you have to see it through a private viewing. Very few people. This is the closest. This is what's so cool about our broadcast today. I mean, this is the closest the audience will ever get to the Shroud of Turin, what we're bringing today on your network. What's amazing when you look at the face is we see an actual image. And Seconda Pio, when he takes the photograph in 1898 of the shroud, there was no electricity in the church, Tucker, so he had to bring in generators. He had to take flash photography. The exposures took 14 minutes and 20 minutes. When I was in Turin, Italy recently, I saw the actual camera he used. It looks like a dorm refrigerator. He used glass plates to take the picture. And in the dark room, now Seconda Pio is a lawyer, and he's just a hobbyist photographer, because who was a professional photographer at the end of the 19th century? And he's in the dark room, and I want to show you what he sees using my cell phone. And when I speak on our tour events, I have our entire audiences do this. If you take your phone and if you put it in classic invert and you just bring up the camera, and if you focus in, I want you to do something. I'm going to hand you my phone. I want you to focus in on the image, and you're going to see exactly what Seconda Pia saw this image, and he's a follower of Jesus. and he believes he's looking at the face of Jesus Christ. Keep in mind, he would be the first one to see the face of Jesus since the apostles. And what does he say in the dark room in 1898, never more appropriately? Oh my God. And so in 1898, he sees this.
Really, it's so much clearer.
Right.
This is photographic negative.
Right. The negative is actually the positive. And so if you trace and go to the back, I want you to look at the back of the image, the head, the blood, the back, all of those hash marks, the abrasions. I estimate there are 700 wounds on the crucified man of the shroud. No one was crucified the way Jesus was crucified in antiquity, the crown of thorns. You ask about the face. Seconda Pia believes that he's looking at the face of God. In that image, of course, he was immediately accused of being a fraudster, a hoaxer, because photography is so new, the darkroom, this can't be an image, right? He had to have faked this.
I don't understand, just as a kind of physics question, like how would a photographic negative be clearer?
Right. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, that's the thing about the shroud. The physics contradict the chemistry contradict the physics. But welcome to Shroud of Turin. You're being red-pilled on the shroud right now.
We built a lighter that burns at 1,800 degrees, and retailers just told us it's too dangerous to sell. So now we're
being baffled right now.
So the image, what's remarkable about this image is that you have to stand at least 8 feet away to see it with the naked eye, as we are right now. The image vanishes if you get closer. It's hard to trace because the image is superficial, Tucker. I mentioned the blood earlier, and there are pints of type AB blood, pre-mortem, post-mortem. Pints of blood all over it. I mean, this was a very, very badly wounded man. So again, indicative of what we know of crucifixion. Pints of blood, type AB blood. And then in addition to that, when you look at the shroud and you see this, and you see all of the image itself that's left, the blood absorbs all the way through the linen, but the image is superficial. Now this is where you have to stay with me. The image is only 2 microns thick. It does not absorb all the way through. So if this was a hoax, if this was a work of art, if there was pigment, if there was dye, if there was paint, it would absorb fully. But if we took a razor to the actual shroud, we could shave off the image because it's that thin. And this is what the best scientists in the world cannot replicate. That's what's fascinating about the shroud. The image, there's no paint, there's no dye, there's no ink. The image is actually something chemically has happened, and we believe it happened at the moment of resurrection. 34,000 billion watts of energy in 1/40th of a billionth of a second. A physicist, my friend Paulo De Lazo at ANEA Laboratories right outside of Rome, spent 5 years. He's a laser expert. He's a physicist who works with lasers. And they were able to duplicate the chemical change of what happens with the linen fibers. 34,000 billion watts of energy at peak power, but the thing is, it was a cold energy. It happened in 1/40th of a billionth of a second. And that is what changed the chemical structure to leave this image on the shroud. So that answers your question. How is there a photograph? Well, scientists doesn't know the mechanism. We have no way to quantify how this happens. The best scientific laboratories, when you look at it, Sandia Labs, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Los Alamos National Lab, ANEA Laboratories in Rome. The world's best scientists cannot reproduce this image that's in the shroud.
Does any other of the many burial shrouds from the region and the period, do any of them contain images?
None. We have blood on them. We have Hansen's disease, the tomb of the shroud. We actually had a...
Leprosy.
Yeah, exactly. That was discovered. The Bible deniers said there was no such thing as leprosy, so Jesus couldn't have healed lepers. Well, we have a shroud that actually has leprosy on it. None of the shrouds that we have this image, which you've just seen, which is... It's mysterious because the shroud is the most lied about artifact in the world, Tucker, and that's why I so appreciate you having me on your program today. It is the most hated artifact in the world. It's the most lied about artifact. It's the most misunderstood artifact in the world. I have an allergic reaction to Catholic relics. There are over 20,000 relics in the Catholic Church, and then a relic is interesting because it has this apocryphal history to it, and yet it can't be studied by the physical sciences. The Catholic Church has only 2 artifacts now that we can call both an artifact and a relic. We have the Shroud of Turin, because it can be tested through history, through sciences. We're going to get to the pollen spores. I mean, this is like a CSI experiment. When you look at the shroud, it's amazing. And then we have the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain, which is the face cloth that John's Gospel talks about that covered his face, that was in the corner of the tomb when the disciples came to see that the tomb was empty that first Easter morning in John chapter 20. So, and that cloth also has human blood. Guess what the blood type is? Type AB. You can't make this stuff up. It's mind-boggling.
So that image was not really clear,
right,
to people until 1898.
1898, the first photograph. And then in 1931, Henri, the first professional photographer, takes these high-resolution images for his day. And that sent shockwaves throughout the scientific community. So much so that you have thinkers like C.S. Lewis. I used to live in Oxford when I did my residency, and I would often go to the kilns to Lewis's home. And you can go in the bedroom of Lewis's home, where the man lived, the great thinker of the 20th century, who was an atheist, who became a Christian. And I look up, and above the mantle in his bedroom, I can see it right now in my mind's eye, he has Henri's image of the face of the crucified man. Because every morning that C.S. Lewis woke up, he wanted to be reminded our God has a face. Jesus narrates God to us. If you want to know what God's like, look at the face of Jesus. And Lewis needed that reminder. And so if C.S. Lewis takes the Shroud of Turin seriously enough to have a picture of it above his mantle in his bedroom, where the first thing he saw every morning when he put his feet on the ground, I wanted to take it more seriously.
Amazing. And he was, of course, Anglican,
right,
not Catholic. What kind of testing has been done, scientific testing?
That is such a great question. This is where I went from being a shroud skeptic, because I was conditioned in Oxford in my residency that we deny miracles, we deny anything supernatural. Oxford is really a factory for creating apostate Bible scholars, by and large. I can say that having been there and been in faculty of theology in Keble College. I know that's not popular, but it's true. I would often go home to my flat in Summertown after reading the Greek New Testament with my cohort, and I would ask my wife Audrey, am I the only one who actually believes in Jesus in this group? And that's okay. And I was conditioned that this is a Catholic relic. There's no historicity behind this. It's a joke. And I was conditioned by that. And then I was scary. And this is why your voice is so important, Tucker. So many people, they know enough to be dangerous. They're TikTok smart or they're YouTube smart. They have a soundbite, but they have no substance to their faith. And I want to have a substance to my faith. I'm a truth addict. I follow truth wherever it leads. And my pastor, Jack Graham, began encouraging me to just look into the primary sources for the shroud. Not to pay attention to the blogosphere, but to pay attention to what do the scientists actually tell us. And once I began to look at the scientific studies that undergird all of the facts I'm sharing with you, I remember it took my breath away. The evidence was so compelling. So to answer your excellent question, given that framework, 102 scientific disciplines have studied the shroud and produced peer-reviewed journals, studies, and cases for all the different aspects. And when I tell you it's the most studied artifact in the world, I mean it. 102 academic disciplines have spent 600,000 scientific hours, like my friend Paul DeLazzo studying the lasers, like my friend Bruno Barberis, the mathematician from University of Turin, not a theologian, not a preacher, great guy, good friend of mine. Bruno is a mathematician, and he took all of the excellent questions you're asking me, the correspondence of how do we know he was crucified, how was he crucified, what blood type, crown of thorns, nail print hands, nail scarred side, nail prints in the calcaneus, the heel, which is interesting, we'll talk about that, the scourge marks and then the patibulum abrasions, the crossbeam. When he factored all of those probabilities together, Bruno Barberis, the mathematician, said there is a 1 in 200 billion chance it's anyone other than Jesus of Nazareth. 1 in 200 billion. I like my odds.
Because the physical, the representations in this image track so precisely to
with
the
Scripture.
accounts.
Exactly. Not only with Scripture, but with what we know of crucifixion from Josephus, from Philo, from all of the other first century historians as well.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's a cliche for a reason, because it's pretty good advice. But sometimes it's not true. Cell phones are a glaring exception. You've got your cell phone, you've had it for years, you don't change. Sometimes your cell phone battery life fades or maybe support more veterans, which it does. So go to puretalk.com/Tucker to get your free phone today. That's puretalk.com/Tucker to switch to our wireless company. It's America's wireless company. It's Pure Talk. What do you mean there are holes in his heels?
Yeah, this is amazing.
Can you describe crucifixion? What was it?
Yes.
What was the purpose? How did they die?
Crucifixion was the most heinous way to die. It turns out humans are really good at figuring out terrible, tragic ways how to destroy ourselves. And
Yes.
crucifixion brings that to a fever pitch. The Persians likely invented it. Alexander the Great, who gives us the language of the Bible, Koine Greek, he also made crucifixion fashionable throughout his Hellenization of the world. The Romans come along and they take crucifixion that they learned from Greek Hellenization and they perfect it for 700 years. Remember, Josephus tells us that during the Jewish revolt, AD 66 to 70, Titus and Vespasian are crucifying 500 Jews a day. And so they were experts. Now, it wasn't like they had a crucifixion manual. There were 30 provinces in the empire during the time of Jesus. Remember, we have Pontius Pilate, who's governor. We have first Augustus, who's emperor. And then we have the other emperors who followed during the time of Jesus. There's 30 provinces. And the provinces would practice crucifixion in different ways, but it was in the Syrian province where Judea was, where it was particularly heinous. I already mentioned we have 21 different records of crucifixion with nail piercing. Nails were iron. I actually have a nail artifact that I'm going to show you. In fact, this is a great time.
Behind every strong masjid is a strong foundation. Alhamdulillah, we've completed the foundation and the lower level.
To do that, I want you to hold the replica of the crucifixion nail. This is a crucifixion nail. It was circular on top, and then it was actually a spike. It was an iron spike. And the Romans would drive this crucifixion nail through the wrists, through the palm area, and then through the heel, the calcaneus. Our heels are very brittle, and so they had to be very accurate when they would pin someone to the cross. And they would likely straddle the heels on either side of what was called, there you have the patibulum, and then you have the cross beam, then you have the center vertical beam, and the heels would be fastened straddling the beam. And the victim would be crucified completely naked. There was no loincloth. I know we see that represented in traditional Christian art, but Jesus would have been crucified naked because the Romans were saying something with this. The Romans were saying, don't ever defy us. You know, we are the truth. And remember, Augustus was called the Son of God. And so when Mark comes along and says, no, Jesus is the Son of God, I mean, those were seditious words for the time because Augustus was called the Son of God. When Augustus gave good news, it was called the gospel. Christianity takes that term euangelion. No, it's not the gospel of Augustus. It's not the gospel of the Roman Empire. It's not Pax Romana. No, this is the gospel of the true Son of God, Jesus Christ, who rose from the dead. And so he's crucified, and
And so crucifixion was, I mean, at least one gospel account describes the other men on either side as criminals or
Correct.
rebels. But
malefactors.
who got crucified?
Well, this is interesting. It turns out we really hate to crucify slaves, and we want to do it in the worst way possible. That was the Roman view. And so non-Roman citizens, however, we do have citizens like Antigonus, the last of the Hasmonean rulers, who's a Roman citizen, but he defies Rome. This guy named Mark Antony, who becomes Augustus, crucifies Antigonus in a really despicable way. He actually beheads him first and then crucifies him. We have all of his remains. It's interesting because these crucifixion nails were thought to be something like amulets, phylacteries. They were thought to bring you good luck. And what's interesting is crucifixion nails were reused again and again. So the very nails that pinned Jesus to the cross had probably been used many times before that to kill other Roman victims.
Because, ironwork is expensive.
Right. And again, the Romans, they were a slave machine. They knew how to kill people. They knew how to enslave. 40% of the empire were slaves, and so they had to know how to crucify them. And so you have this slave crucifying machine that is the Roman Empire. And then if you were a citizen but you defied the empire, you would be crucified too.
How does crucifixion kill a man?
It's really interesting.
Were women crucified, by the way?
Yes. In fact, they were crucified naked, often facing towards the cross, just for pornographic reasons.
Ugh. How does it kill you?
It kills you in a variety of ways. It doesn't kill you quickly. It maximizes torment while minimizing it actually maximizes the length of death, and it prolongs death. And so when we study the blood work, so there are some amazing hematological reports that I've enjoyed reading thoroughly. When we study the blood that's on the crucified man, it bears correspondence with that Jesus, there's high levels of creatinine, which means he was suffering from kidney failure, high levels of ferritin. His body had inflammation all over it. He was dehydrated. You read John's Gospel. Remember in John's Gospel, Jesus, one of the 7 sayings, I thirst, he's dehydrated. We know that Jesus likely lost 1/3 of his blood volume during flagellation. So he was dying of a variety of things. Many thinkers believe that he died of suffocation, asphyxiation because of pulmonary edema. And we see that pulmonary edema reflected both on the shroud cloth and on the Sudarian of Oviedo, the face cloth. It's 6 parts pulmonary edema, 1 part blood. Again, a hoaxer is not going to make this stuff up. I mean, it becomes so crazy.
Pulmonary edema, so your lungs fill with fluid.
Fluid, blood, and a mixture. In fact, there is a translucent mixture of fluid around the side wound. We looked at the side wound there between rib 5 and 6, just above that triangle, which is really a patch from a burn hole. There's actually a translucent serum around that again is consistent with what John's Gospel said. Blood and water flowed out of Jesus because he was already dead. And so the crucifixion would prolong that. High levels of ferritin, high levels of creatinine. Jesus is suffering liver failure, kidney failure. His body has inflammation all over it. I believe, though, that Jesus died of cardiac arrest, massive heart failure, congenital heart failure, because he has labored breathing. We know all of this from the blood samples.
The New Testament, one account says that his tormentors wanted him off the cross by the Sabbath, by
right,
Passover.
That's Deuteronomy 21, actually before nightfall.
Before nightfall.
Right.
So they broke his legs, or they were planning on breaking his legs. They didn't, because he died.
And that's consistent with Messianic prophecy in David's Psalm 22.
Yes. But why would breaking the legs of a crucified man hasten his death?
A wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. So the one way you could prolong your life is you would kind of essentially try to stand up while you were being crucified, even though your feet were nailed straddling the cross. And you would just edge up ever so often while you're trying to breathe, and that would prolong your life. So if you broke your legs, obviously
Nothing in your fridge cleans the air. That's why your fresh food rots in days. Watch the next 30 seconds, and you'll see the exact same trick cruise ship kitchens use to keep fresh food alive for weeks at sea. Your fridge cools the food. It runs 24 hours.
You can't stand up.
So you can't. So the point is, when you're hanging by your wrists, you can't breathe.
Exactly, and you suffocate. You die in your own blood, essentially. And so you can't do that. And so that's why. But they come to Jesus, even though they break the legs of the criminals on the right or left, indicating that Jesus suffered a different kind of torment than they suffered in his flagellation. We'll get to that here in a moment. But they didn't need to break his legs, because he was already dead. In fact, they're surprised. Remember, Pilate is shocked that he was so soon dead. Jesus begins the crucifixion around noon. He's dead by 3 p.m. The Jewish day would begin at 6 p.m. And so they only have about 3 hours to get Jesus off the cross, ask for the body of Jesus from Pontius Pilate, and then lay him in a tomb that was not far, probably 150 feet away from where Jesus was crucified.
So this is the coolest Christmas present I'll get this year. This is a leather Alp pouch. Logo right there, gets on your belt, made in the United States out of actual leather. If you carry, you can put the firearm on one side, and they carried the crossbar.
Yeah, Pontius Pilate, and then lay him in a tomb that was not far, probably 150 feet away from where Jesus was crucified.
So this is the coolest Christmas present I'll get this year. This is a leather Alp pouch. Logo right there, gets on your belt, made in the United States out of actual leather. If you carry, you can put the firearm on one side and a loaded tin of Alp on the other. It will never be far from you, and it is legit cool. What does it mean that they carried the crossbar?
Yeah.
What's the crossbar?
That is such a great question. So, and this is what's so amazing. When again, I don't privilege this, I just look at this through historical eyes. When you look at the back, the dorsal image on the shroud, you can see that there are scourge marks all over it. But in the right shoulder, coming down at a diagonal, there are abrasions all over the back. We mentioned that Jesus, the crucified man of the shroud, weighed around 175 to 180 pounds. The patibulum, which is just the crossbeam, so they didn't carry the whole cross. They would only carry the crossbeam. And again, that wood was scarce as well, by the way, in the Roman Empire. So that crossbeam would have been used again and again for other crucifixion victims. And so Jesus experiences the scourging, and then he's asked to carry the cross. And that cross, the crossbeam, the patibulum, weighs around 125 pounds, and he can't carry it. He falls. And this is one of the most moving experiences for me when I was studying the signatures of the pollen. We actually have not just pollen, but we have limestone and clay soil that is native only to Jerusalem. And it's on 3 parts of the crucified man in the shroud. Are you ready for this? It's on the feet, obviously, because he walked barefoot. It's on the knees, and then the tip of the nose. So when Jesus is carrying the patibulum, he falls. And he not only falls, he falls hard. He collapses, and his face gashes the ground. Because we have in the tip of his nose actual soil from the land of Israel, from Jerusalem.
So the crossbeam is the piece of wood to which his
right, fastened.
His wrists are nailed. And that's tied to the vertical post?
Yeah, to match the Greek letter tau. So it would look like a capital T. We see that. And he's tied to that post, but he's nailed to it. Make no mistake, he was nailed to it.
Right, but the cross is tied.
Exactly.
Why the letter tau? Was there a significance?
There wasn't. The Christian movement makes it significant.
Yeah.
We call this staurogram, where you write the letter tau and then the letter rho, so the 2 letters, and we actually see that used in early Christian scriptures. It's essentially just a quick way of saying Jesus was crucified. It becomes an early Christian icon.
It's just, so this is not really an execution method per se, as much as it's like a way of torturing someone to death. It's
Absolutely.
It's like the rack or the spiked coffin or...
But even worse, because it prolonged the agony as long as some would be crucified outside of Jerusalem. They'd be on the cross 3, 4, 5 days.
So this was for the most reviled enemies of the state. Like, there's no respect at all. This is not like executing a man by beheading or firing squad in later periods. This is like this is for slaves, insurrectionists, like the worst of the worst.
And thinking about the heel, you think about the first gospel message. It's actually called the Proto-Evangelium in Genesis 3:15. Remember that first prophecy that his heel, he would crush his head, but the enemy would strike his heel. And we know that the enemy did his best to crucify Jesus and did strike his heel. And then you look at that blood that was prophesied even as far back as Genesis 3:15, that Jesus would smash the enemy's head with his feet, even though his foot was crucified and pierced. And we see that it did take blood, and a lot of blood. And I think sometimes we can look at this so academically we forget, no, this was a real historical person who suffered this torment.
It's just kind of wild if you think about it, that the early church took a torture device, like the scariest and most humiliating of all torture devices, and made it the symbol of their religion.
Totally. And I mean, again, if
what is that?
Well, if we were making up a religious movement, we would never start there.
I don't think so.
Make no mistake. I mean, if you and I...
No, because you'd want your God to be triumphant. You wouldn't want your God to be humiliated.
Certainly not crucified.
Not by some colonial governor and a bunch of local dumb religious leaders.
And I think the message in this, and there's so many points of application, many people wonder if God really loves them. And they say, well, how do I know God loves me? Or if I send away God's love for me? Paul wrote in Romans 5:8, but God demonstrated his love for us. and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And the shroud is a beautiful demonstration. It's a great reminder that God gave his best for us, Tucker, when he sent his son. He didn't give us second best. He gave us his very best.
But wait, I mean, if God's going to come to earth and redeem humanity, why would he allow himself to be like ritually humiliated and tortured in the most embarrassing possible way? Wouldn't he show up and be like, I'm God, like, you're all wrong, I'm here now, Daddy's home, like, knock it off, I have all power? He wouldn't, like, why would he submit to some like ludicrous local authority and die with criminals on either side? It's like the opposite of what you would imagine.
It smacks of authenticity to me.
Well, I agree with that, because it's so not what you would expect.
No, you wouldn't. And 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might be the righteousness of God. And so that means that God treated Jesus, and we see that very clearly and depicted in the shroud, as if he lived your life and mine. So in Christ, and this is the beautiful message of grace, he could treat us as if we lived the life of Jesus. And that's the message of grace. It doesn't make sense. There's not an equation that's going to help us make sense of grace.
But it's like the early church decided to brag about its weaknesses.
Right. And that's the foolishness of preaching that Paul talks about. It's the foolishness of preaching. It's the wisdom of God to those who believe and foolishness to those who deny it.
Walk through in clinical detail the torture that this man endured before the cross.
Tucker, it's something I'm still learning about because it takes my breath away. Even though I've published 250,000 words in academic works on the resurrection and on the physical torment of Jesus. I've published several popular books on it. I've talked about it, and I can't get over it because there's a realism to it that reminds me of how shameful my own sin is. Remember,
but pretend you're a police.
Hi guys, I'm going to test my new zoom scope today. This monocular scope is so powerful, it zooms in on objects miles away, which is exactly why regulators are trying to get rid of it. There's a new zoom scope out there, and it's the most savage gadget you'll ever own. When you connect this thing to your regular smartphone, it becomes a professional telescopic camera. But here's the bad news. In just a few weeks, new consumer safety rules will force the manufacturer to cap the zoom power of this product. That means a weaker lens, pathetic zoom power, and a magnification that won't let you see things clearly like this current version does. It's called Starscope Monocular, and it's unlike anything you've ever seen. No blurry or pixelated images, no bulky lens, no shaky footage. Just a precision-engineered scope that can zoom in on anything and turns any regular smartphone into a professional telescopic camera. 100% mechanical, completely self-powered, without plugging in a single thing. Starscope was originally built for Canadian military recon and sniper missions. After the Army needed a scope that could zoom in farther than anything they had at the time, it gave them that extra zoom power without the bulk, weight, or limits of a traditional scope. Now, ordinary Canadian citizens finally have access to it, which is exactly
Sorry
the problem.
about that,
Major
guys.
retailers like Amazon,
Had to go use the washroom.
stock it because it makes every lens or camera on their shelves look like a complete waste of money. And now, regulators are stepping in even further. This current batch is the last time it will ever be sold at full zoom.
Reporter here.
Right.
So Jesus is with his disciples at night. Judas shows up in the bunch of olive trees are kind of standing around. Romans show up, local religious authorities show up, grab Jesus. He goes on trial. Walk us through what happens.
Absolutely. Well, it started before that. It would have started before that night because Jesus cleanses the temple, and he literally reserves his fiercest words for the corrupt religious establishment.
I noticed that.
Jesus hates hypocrites. He hates corrupt religion. In this case, it was the corrupt Jewish priesthood. It was the corruption of what was happening and taking place at the temple. The money changers. You had to put all of your currency in the the Tyrian temple tax, and they were ripping everyone off, and they made God's house a den of thieves. Jesus clears the tables. That's a messianic sign. He's no, who can do that but God himself cleansed his house. My house shall be called a house of prayer. And so that's when they begin to decide to kill him. Who's they? The Sanhedrin. The 70 members of the Jewish ruling council ask Pilate to crucify Jesus. under the reign of Caiaphas, who is
after Jesus rolls
Right.
into the temple and
Right.
overturns the tables of the money changers and says, "Get out."
They're like, we're going to crucify him. We're going to kill him. We want him dead. And again, Pilate had to sanction that. And so Pilate, being the politician he was, he says, okay, we'll do it. And so Jesus is arrested. He's taken to the home of Caiaphas. You can go to this home today. It's the first century steps that Jesus would have been led to Caiaphas' home. He spends his final night there, which would have been Thursday night. He is beaten. He's tortured. They put a blindfold on him. They began to hit him. They club him. There are marks on the crucified man that are different from the scourging. He's clubbed. Someone took something that's the equivalent of a bat and struck him with like a rod. And that's when they're saying, "Prophesy to us, preacher, who struck you?" Because they blindfolded him. And then he is led from there to Herod Antipas, I find no fault in him. Send him back to Pilate. Everyone's trying to. Herod Antipas was he was the tetrarch of Galilee. He was one of the Jewish leaders who was put in place by the Roman Empire, who beheaded John the Baptist. He was the one who killed Jesus' friend.
So he was like a local guy who was a stooge of the Roman government.
Totally, but from Galilee. But they all came to Jerusalem for Passover, so this is not unusual. And then ultimately Jesus ends up in Praetorium at the hands of Pilate.
What's Praetorium?
It would have been right off the Temple Mount, this structure where the Romans were headquartered to keep peace in the city. So you have the Jewish priests, and they have their armed forces that arrest Jesus like their Jewish police. And then Jesus is handed over to the Roman authorities to be crucified. And in John 19:1, I think it's one of the most overlooked, understated passages in all the Bible. And Pilate had Jesus flogged. And if we read that too quickly, we just don't understand the impact of it. And that's why I brought these artifacts for you. I want you to... This is a flagrum that we had commissioned. I want you to hold this, Tucker, and I want you to get it in your hand.
It's a flagrum.
This is a flagrum.
Okay, so this is a wooden dowel with 3 rawhide lines coming off it and lead balls on the end.
Right. And I have 2 of them because we know from the crucified man that there were 2 torturers. So Jesus is being whipped simultaneously by 2 different executioners.
Some moms want to build income from home. They just don't want to post, pitch, or be online all the time. That's exactly why Amazon Zero is catching on. 0 social media, 0 shipping, 0 tech headache.
So the purpose of the lead balls on the end of the rawhide
is to inflict as much torment as possible. And so sometimes you would have flagrums with bone ends, but there are all these barbell shapes on the hash marks of the crucified man, which leads me to believe that it was used in something just like this. So this is, again, a 1-to-1 flagrum that the Romans would use.
So if you hit someone with a length of rawhide and a piece of lead balls at the end, I mean, you kill someone with that.
Right. And this is where Jesus loses 1/3 of his blood volume. And I want you to understand something for the benefit of our audience. Notice how short this is. I mean, this is not like an Indiana Jones whip, right? I mean, there was a demonic intimacy to this torment. And the blood of Jesus would have been splattered all over the executioners. And so they flogged Jesus. There are 200 wounds on the dorsal, on the back image. So if we took time right now to count them up, there's over 200 on the back. There's 172 on the front. There is not an area of Jesus' body that has not been tortured, including the pelvic region. We do not
hit him in the crotch with this?
Again and again.
With lead tips?
Lead tips. And not only that...
You just take the skin right off a man's body with that.
And actually... according to the hematological reports, we think his right eye was blinded. So there's not only, we'll get to the crown of thorns here shortly, so hold your breath for that one. But there's his right eye, there are wounds consistent with flagellation. So we don't know if the guys were drunk or if they were just going to town on him, but they whip him, and at some point the scourge hits him probably from the back of the head in the eye right here, and likely blinds him in the right eye, because his right eye is severely punctured in the image of the crucified man. And also his left cheek, probably from the rod beating at Caiaphas' home, is also hugely, I mean, it's like he's been in a heavyweight boxing match. I mean, he can't see out of his right eye. His left cheek is raised. And so this is the flagrum.
So this was before he was sentenced to crucifixion, before he was sentenced to death.
Pilate, again, he brings Jesus after, and again, so 372 wounds that we count, but again, we don't have the lateral side. So again, I want to reiterate, there's probably 700 wounds on his body if you count them up, and if you
couldn't survive that long term, right?
And this is where Pilate then fashions a crown of thorns, and he places it on Jesus, his head, and let me set these so we can make some room.
So that's the halo of thorns.
No, actually not. Let me show you. I thought it was a halo because you and I, we've both been so influenced by early Christian art, and specifically medieval art, but this is what took my breath away. And I want you to be careful with this because these are Bethlehem thorns. This is the crown of thorns. This is the helmet of thorns. This was not a wreath, Tucker. This was not like a sweatband you wore around your forehead. They fashioned this diabolical crown of thorns, these Bethlehem thorns, that when they dry, they're as sharp as nails. You can feel that. I mean, it pricks your finger right to the touch. And they ram this on Jesus' head. And I want you to let this set in because there's 50 puncture wounds on the head, both the forehead, the top, and the back of the head of the crucified man of the shroud. 50 puncture marks. And so you can imagine.
And that's all detectable on the shroud?
Right on the shroud. You can see the back of the head, all of the blood pooling in the back of the head from this crown of thorns being rammed on his head. So Jesus has 700 scourge marks, and then they slam this on his head. And this is where Pilate brings Jesus before the Jewish mob. And this is where we hear in the Latin, ecce homo, behold the man, Pilate says. And he's bloodied. How does he even stand? We don't know. His love compelled him to stay standing on our behalf. And this is the point. You imagine seeing a man in this state. He will very quickly be dead. And it's not enough for the crowd. They begin to yell, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him.
Demons.
And this is where Pilate says,
I should also note, as a historical fact, he never did anything wrong. Like, he was never even accused. He was never accused of hurting anybody.
Remember, all of the false witnesses came forward when Jesus is in this dummy trial at Caiaphas' home, and they say, well, he's a bastard. Remember, Jesus is accused of being an illegitimate child. He's accused of blaspheming, of casting out demons by Beelzebub, by the worker, by the prince of demons. All of these false accusations are brought against him, and Jesus doesn't open his mouth.
But just to be clear, even if the false accusations were real accusations, if they were true, he's still never accused of hurting anyone.
Right. He
in any
no
way.
Sin. No sin was.
But he's not even accused of it.
Right.
So, right. So just to put it in context, so it's not, they didn't even claim like he killed a man in Reno, shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. There's nothing like that at all.
No.
Or he cheated people out of money, or he, kicked out the money changers and stole the money.
Exactly.
Nothing like that, all right?
This was diabolical in every sense of the word, as you rightly point out. And this crown of thorns, the first time I saw it was in Jerusalem. And Tucker, it took my breath away. It still takes my breath away.
So the reason that you've revised, or you're going with the modern revision to the common halo of thorns, is based on
the shroud,
the blood record right there.
Absolutely. The punctures, the wounds, basically the pathology of his head and his face and the back of his head. And this is what you asked, how do we know this is Jesus? Well, the helmet of thorns leaves it beyond all doubt in my mind. I believe this is a slam dunk case that the crucified man is the historical Jesus, without a doubt, based on the evidence.
If you were to recreate, if you were to take the gospel accounts and Josephus and the 21 total accounts of Jesus' crucifixion, which I think is accepted by everyone, atheist and Christian alike, as a historical fact.
Right.
If you were to take all those facts from the record and try and create an image of them, could you create this?
No. That's the fascinating thing. The best scientists in the world cannot explain how there's an image there, and they cannot replicate it.
And it couldn't be replicated now?
No. Even with our best technologies today, it can't be replicated in any way.
For just $67, you can generate as many videos as you want and never have to worry about showing your face on camera.
So this brings us to, I think, one of the central questions, which is the provenance of this. Where did it come from? What do we know?
That's the fascinating thing.
About where this has been for the last 2,000 years.
Well, it turns out there's a scientist, a criminologist by the name of Max Fry, who was involved in the Nuremberg trials, a very respected criminologist. He spent 5 years of his life. Again, this is where I say 102 academic disciplines. These are men and women who risked their academic reputation. And again, why I'm so grateful you're bringing this to light today on your program. Max Fry is now dead. Spends 5 years of his life studying the pollen spores on the shroud.
What's a pollen spore?
Pollen. Well, I have it on me from this beautiful state we're in right now.
Yeah.
From traveling here and all of the allergies here right now.
Yeah.
But there are 56 different specimens of pollen that Max Fry detects.
From plants.
From plants. From plant life, botany. And what's amazing about it, again, if we're making this up or trying to hoax this, we would not have known this 700 years ago in medieval Europe.
Right.
There are certain pollen flower plants that bloom only in springtime, where in the land of Israel, where more specifically in Jerusalem, and that pollen is on the shroud. So you have pollen flowers that only bloom in April in the land of Israel, and that pollen signature, according to Max Fry, that pollen species, we have 56 of them, is embedded in the shroud chemically. What's fascinating is we don't just have pollen from the land of Israel. We have pollen that traces the provenance of the shroud from Jerusalem, AD 30, to Edessa, which is far eastern Turkey, where it's there for 900 years. And then we have pollen from Constantinople.
The Eastern Roman Empire.
Right. Constantinople, and again, the shroud is constantly escaping the caliphates of the time. So it goes from Constantinople in around 1200 through Athens, finally up to Liry, France, with a knight, Geoffrey de Charnay, who he never says how he got it, but he has it. And then ultimately he sells it for 2 castles to the Savoy family of France. And then it's moved to Chambéry, France, and it's under the House of Savoy. And then it becomes very political because the Savoys then relocate their kingdom to Turin, Italy, and to solidify their political rule, they make sure they bring the shroud with them in the 16th century to Turin, Italy.
Where, as a matter of written record,
yeah, great question,
leaving aside the modern chemical analysis of the shroud, how far can we trace it back so we know it was
we can trace it first, of course, as I already mentioned, the shroud is mentioned in all 4 Gospels. And then we have Eusebius, who's the most respected church historian. He's at the Council of Nicaea in 325, talking about the face cloth, the image cloth of Jesus. He's the one who gives us the story of the shroud going from the land of Israel to King Abgar, who's the king of Edessa, where it stays for 900 years.
And we know it was there.
Right.
Okay, so...
And it's known by different names, though. This is the thing that I want to say. I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan. Kansas City Chiefs were not always the Chiefs. They were the Dallas Texans before they moved to Kansas City. It's very similar with the shroud. It's known by different names.
But it's the same object.
Yeah, the Mandilion, the image of Edessa, the face cloth. And as we continue to red pill ourselves with this, Tucker, you have the pollen that matches it. You have the textual records that match it. Eusebius, we have these other wonderful early Christian historians who are talking about this face cloth.
When's the first written reference to it?
It would be Eusebius, the great church historian, early 4th century.
Early 300s.
Right. 325 AD is Council of Nicaea, so it antedate that. So early 300s.
Okay, so...
And he's bishop of Eusebius. And keep in mind, what is Eusebius?
Wait, but hold on. But just so as a... Okay, so we know this has existed for at least 1,800 years.
Exactly.
So
the
that's
written record.
The written record shows it. So that's kind of not in dispute.
Right.
So if this were a forgery, it would have to have been a forgery at least as early as the 4th century. That's
exactly.
And so that right there kind of tells you, like, if modern science can replicate this,
good point.
Probably not possible in 20 AD.
Right. Incredibly not.
Okay, so I didn't know that.
No, nobody does. And
because I
all
was
this has been
told by
suppressed.
Reader's Digest in the 70s. No, I'm serious. I first
Yeah.
Strange Stories and Amazing Facts
Right.
was a Reader's Digest book that I read in 1980 in summer camp, and I read about this, and they're like, this amazing thing, and photographic negative, but we know it's a product of the Renaissance or the late Middle Ages.
False.
But there was already a written record of it going back to the
Greatest
4th century.
historian of the early church, Eusebius, who I was going to mention it. He's in Caesarea. He has a library. We don't know the sources he had, but he had an incredible library.
Yeah.
So he's standing on the shoulders of historians before him. And so this is a long-standing historical tradition in the church. One of the things that's interesting to me, and one of the things I had to get over as I began studying the Shroud, Tucker, is I thought it was a Catholic relic. Now, we need to, again, I want to just hammer on this because you have a lot of Protestants that watch your program and a lot of Christians who think, oh, that's just a Catholic relic. I'm not interested in the Catholic Church, therefore I'm not interested in the Shroud. The Catholic Church did not take control of the Shroud of Turin until 1983. 2 years of probate court. The last king of Savoy, the